The Forgotten Melody. Chapter 1. The Old Radio. It was a quiet Saturday morning in the small town of Willow Creek, Vermont. Margaret Thompson, a 58-year-old retired librarian, sat in her cozy living room with a cup of steaming tea. The autumn leaves outside her window painted the landscape in shades of gold and crimson. She had always loved this time of year, the crisp air, the smell of wood smoke, and the gentle rustle of leaves. Margaret's eyes wandered to the old wooden radio that sat on the mantelpiece. It had belonged to her late husband, Joseph, a man who had cherished music above all else. The radio was a relic from the 1960s, its wooden frame scratched and worn, but still functional. Joseph had spent countless hours tuning into distant stations, searching for songs that spoke to his soul. After his passing 5 years ago, Margaret had kept the radio as a memento, though she rarely turned it on. But that morning, something compelled her to dust it off. She gently wiped the surface with a soft cloth, her fingers tracing the grooves in the wood. As she switched it on, a crackling sound filled the room, followed by the faint strains of a melody she hadn't heard in decades. It was a jazz tune, one that Joseph had loved dearly. Margaret closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her. For a moment, she could almost feel Joseph's presence beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, yet strangely unfamiliar. She couldn't quite place it. When the song ended, a deep, velvety voice came through the static. "Good morning, listeners. You've just heard The Forgotten Melody, a rare gem from the 1940s. It's a song that's been lost to time, much like the stories of those who once loved it." Margaret frowned. She had never heard of a song called The Forgotten Melody. Curious, she waited for the announcer to say more, but the broadcast abruptly cut off, replaced by static. She sat there for a long time, staring at the radio. The song had stirred something deep within her, a sense of nostalgia perhaps, or a longing for something she couldn't quite name. Chapter 2. The Search Begins. The rest of the day passed in a blur for Margaret. She couldn't shake the feeling that the song was important, though she couldn't explain why. That evening, she decided to do some research. She pulled out Joseph's old laptop, which she had kept but rarely used. Typing in "The Forgotten Melody" yielded no results. There were no records of the song, no mentions in music archives, nothing, as if the song had never existed. Frustrated but determined, she turned to her collection of vinyl records. Joseph had amassed a vast library of music over the years, and she hoped that perhaps one of the records held a clue. She spent hours sifting through the albums, carefully examining the labels and track listings. Just as she was about to give up, she found something unusual. Inside the sleeve of an old Billie Holiday record was a faded photograph. It showed a group of people gathered around a piano in what appeared to be a dimly lit club. Margaret recognized Joseph. He was much younger, his hair dark and full, a cigarette dangling from his lips. But she didn't recognize the others. A woman with striking red hair, a man in a fedora, and another man who seemed to be the pianist. On the back of the photo was a handwritten note. "The Maple Leaf Club, 1971. The night we played The Forgotten Melody. Never forget." Margaret's heart raced. Could this be the same song she had heard on the radio? She needed to find out more. She spent the next few days reaching out to old friends of Joseph's, asking if they remembered the Maple Leaf Club or the song. Most of them had no recollection, but one man, a retired musician named Carl, remembered the club. "The Maple Leaf Club? Yeah, it was a little place on the outskirts of town. Closed down years ago. Joseph used to hang out there a lot. Why do you ask?" Margaret explained about the song in the photo. Carl was silent for a moment. "You know," he said finally, "there was a rumor back then about a song that was never recorded. People said it was cursed, that anyone who played it would vanish. I always thought it was just a tall tale, but now?" Margaret's curiosity deepened. She decided to visit the site of the old Maple Leaf Club, hoping to find answers. Chapter 3. The Maple Leaf Club. The next morning, Margaret set out for the outskirts of Willow Creek. The Maple Leaf Club had long since been abandoned, but she hoped that visiting the site might spark some memories or provide clues about the mysterious song. The drive took her through winding country roads, past fields dotted with golden hay bales and old farmhouses. The autumn sun cast a warm glow over the landscape, but Margaret's mind was elsewhere. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was on the verge of uncovering something important. Finally, she arrived at the site of the club. All that remained was a dilapidated building, its windows boarded up, and its roof caved in. The once vibrant neon sign that had welcomed patrons now lay broken on the ground, its letters faded and unreadable. Margaret parked her car and stepped out, the crunch of leaves under her feet the only sound in the quiet morning. She walked around the building, her eyes scanning for any sign of life. It was eerie, standing there in the shadow of what had once been a bustling night spot. She tried the front door, which was locked, but a side entrance was slightly ajar. Pushing it open, she stepped inside. The air was thick with dust, and the smell of decay filled her nostrils. The interior was a mess, overturned chairs, broken glasses, and old posters peeling off the walls. As she ventured further in, her flashlight illuminated the remnants of a stage. The piano, once the centerpiece of the club, stood in the corner, its keys yellowed and cracked. Margaret approached the piano, her fingers brushing against the ivory. She remembered Joseph's stories about the club, how he had spent countless nights here, listening to music and sharing drinks with friends. He had spoken of the pianist, a man named Sam, who could play anything from jazz to blues. Sam had been a legend in Willow Creek, but no one had heard from him in years. Margaret noticed something on the piano bench, a sheet of paper, yellowed with age. She picked it up and saw that it was sheet music. At the top, scribbled in faded ink, was the title, The Forgotten Melody. Her heart raced as she studied the notes. This was it, the song she had been searching for. But why had it been left here, forgotten and abandoned? As she examined the sheet music, she heard a faint sound, a whisper, almost imperceptible. She turned around, her flashlight cutting through the darkness, but there was no one there. The club was silent once more. Margaret decided to take the sheet music with her, hoping that she could decipher its secrets. As she left the club, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Chapter 4. The Pianist's Story. Back at home, Margaret spent hours poring over the sheet music. The notes were complex, with unexpected shifts and haunting harmonies. She tried playing it on her old upright piano, but the melody felt elusive, as if it were resisting her attempts to bring it to life. Frustrated, she decided to dig deeper into the history of the Maple Leaf Club and its enigmatic pianist, Sam. She visited the local library, scouring old newspapers and records for any mention of him. Her efforts paid off when she found an article from 1972. The headline read, "Mystery at the Maple Leaf Club. Pianist disappears without a trace." The article recounted how Sam had vanished one night after playing the forgotten melody for the last time. Witnesses claimed that the song had an otherworldly quality, as if it were alive. After that night, no one had seen or heard from Sam again. She also discovered that the club had closed shortly after Sam's disappearance. The owner, a man named Victor, had refused to speak about what had happened, and the club had fallen into disrepair. Determined to learn more, Margaret tracked down Victor, who now lived in a retirement home on the other side of town. He was an old man, his face lined with age, but his eyes still held a spark of life. When Margaret mentioned Maple Leaf Club and Sam, Victor's expression grew somber. "That song," he said quietly. "It was different. I've never heard anything like it before or since. It was beautiful, but there was something dangerous about it." "What do you mean?" Margaret asked. Victor hesitated, as if choosing his words carefully. Sam always said the song wasn't his. He claimed he'd heard it in a dream, played by a man he didn't recognize. He said the man told him it was a gift, but it came with a price. When Sam played it that last night, it was like he wasn't himself anymore. And then he was just gone. Margaret's mind raced. Could the song really have had such power? She thanked Victor and left, her thoughts swirling with questions. That night, she tried once more to play the melody. As her fingers moved across the keys, she felt a strange pull, as if the music were guiding her. But when she reached the final notes, the room grew cold, and she heard the faint whisper again, a voice barely audible, saying her name. She froze, her heart pounding. The melody was no longer just a song. It was a key, unlocking something she couldn't understand. Chapter 5. The Forgotten Melody. Margaret knew she had to uncover the truth about the song, no matter the cost. She returned to the Maple Leaf Club one last time, determined to play the forgotten melody in the place where it had been first performed. The club was even dimmer than before, the air heavy with an unspoken presence. Margaret set the sheet music on the piano and took a deep breath. As her fingers touched the keys, the melody flowed effortlessly, as if the song had been waiting for her. The music filled the room, each note resonating with a power that sent shivers down her spine. She could feel the energy building, the atmosphere shifting. And then, as she reached the final bars, the piano began to play itself, the keys moving as if guided by an unseen hand. Margaret stepped back, her breath caught in her throat. The melody grew louder, more intense, until it seemed to consume everything around her. The walls of the club dissolved, replaced by a swirling vortex of light and sound. And then she saw him, Joseph. He stood before her, just as she remembered him, his eyes filled with love and warmth. Tears filled her eyes as she reached out to him. "Joseph, I don't understand." "It's a bridge," he explained, "a way to connect the past and the present. The forgotten melody isn't just a song, it's a way to bring back what's been lost." Margaret realized then that the song had been a gift, a chance to say goodbye to the man she had loved so deeply. As the melody faded, Joseph's image began to dissolve. "I'll always be with you," he whispered, before disappearing into the light. When Margaret opened her eyes, she was back in the club, alone once more. The piano was silent, the sheet music gone. But she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known since Joseph's passing. She left the club and drove home, the melody still echoing in her mind. It was no longer forgotten. It was a part of her, a reminder that love transcends time and space. And there we have it, the conclusion of The Forgotten Melody. How did you find the story overall? I hope it resonated with you and kept you engaged throughout. Let me know your thoughts. The end.